NFC East.
The beast in the East. Here we go.
Wow. Philadelphia. Nice headline. Explosion, implosion. Were you drinking before you came up with that one? Philadelphia Eagles. If they don't win, somebody's going to perish. Nick Sirianni had great success early with the Eagles. That was a Super Bowl he took them to as a young head coach. Great quarterback, Jalen Hurts. Bad relationship last season. Their fall from grace last season was absolutely stunning. He blew up his coaching staff. He didn't take the hit. He put a lot of guys out on the street, unemployment line. They go into the marketplace trying to fix the team. They drafted DB early. They drafted 3 young defensive players that were all probably going to play for the Eagles this first week of the season. And then they went across the state line. How the hell this was ever allowed to happen? They stole Saquon Barkley, who I think is one of the really complete running backs in the NFL, who's been buried in the spotlight because he's been on a bad New York Giants team. So they have A.J. Brown, and they have the former Heisman Trophy winner, and they got Jalen Hurts, and now they add Saquon Barkley, and they got a bunch of veteran studs in the front. And Kellen Moore comes in, the ex-Charger and Cowboy coordinator, comes in to be the OC in Philadelphia. Now, they've lost Fletcher Cox, who's retired, lost one of their linebackers who retired. They're going to be a little bit different defensively. I think Philadelphia's got it right there in front of them. But, boy, last year, how they disintegrated the second half of the season, it was absolutely stunning. I got Philadelphia to win. Dallas, they got Dak, yet to get his contract, C.D. Lamb, who's got his money. I think, and they got tight ends who can catch the ball. They've always developed good offensive linemen. There's a little bit of flux in the offensive line. I think the intangible in Dallas is the arrival of Dalvin Cook, the former 1,000-yard rusher Minnesota. I still think he's got gas left in the tank. So you got Cook, and you got the comeback of Ezekiel Elliott there. The only negative in Dallas, they've had been chewed up by injuries to the defensive front. There's no doubt that Micah Parsons is one of the great linebackers, but they lost his running mate, Landon Vander Esch, who's retired because of neck surgeries. That's a big blow there. Dallas is not a complete football team, but I think offensively they're going to be really dynamic. Speaking of another place that we could have changes, if the Giants don't win this season, somebody's going to pay the price. It might be the general manager. It might be the head coach, Brian Daboll. Daniel Jones has taken a fierce beating at quarterback for the New York Football Giants. He's had so many injuries. He's such a warrior. But now they don't have Saquon Barkley. And I don't think they've drafted very well. And they've had problems with their offensive line. Now, in the draft, they did add LSU's Malik Neighbors. And then they worked a deal to get Brian Burns, the big physical inside defensive lineman. That front on defense for the Giants might be better than anybody realizes. But can Daniel Jones do it without a lot of help? That becomes the big issue there. So that bears watching. If they have another bad season, somebody's going to pay the price. And in Washington, it's misery. Last week they cut 4 of last year's draft picks that were made by Ron Rivera. Just cut them loose. You don't do that. Usually you keep your draft picks for 3 or 4 years to grow them. But Dan Quinn came in and said, those guys can't play. Out of here. Jaden Daniels will play, starting quarterback LSU. Austin Eckler will make his debut wearing burgundy and gold, came from the Chargers. They got one good wide receiver from Ohio State, Terry McLaurin, but I just don't think they have enough players on offense. Defensively, at one time, that was a real good defensive front, but a couple of those guys have gotten hurt, gotten old. Some of the guys have gotten rid of. I just don't think that they have anywhere near a good 22 to start on offense and defense. So I think it's going to be a learning curve season for Dan Quinn as head coach, and I think it's going to be a learning curve season for Jaden Daniels. So that's how I view the East, and you're on your street corner because you always got opinions that are out there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, as long as we can talk about out there. When I see the NFC East, I immediately think of Brent Musburger, the NFL Today on CBS, back in that era when the NFC East was loaded with talent.
Throwback.
And the media fell in love with them. And we were always watching Dallas, Giants, Redskins, that whole thing. So I always think of that when I see this division. The Eagles, you got to assume, they're going to probably do well. Last year, they lost their last 7 in a row.
I think they were 1-6 at the end, which is unbelievable considering where they started.
Yeah, it was just insane. It just didn't make any sense. Like I say, I want the Raiders to be relevant. I want the Cowboys to be relevant. I think it makes a more entertaining league. And I'll tell you what, that Trey Lance had a hell of a preseason. So if something happened to Prescott, they could probably keep this thing going. The Giants, it's just a mishmash. I'm shocked as you are that Saquon Barkley made the move to go to Philly. And then the Commanders, how do you think the kid's going to do? Daniels there, quarterback for the Washington.
He played 2 of the 3 preseason, and he coped with it. But that's preseason. There's a lot of those guys that he lined up against are no longer in the NFL. They're applying for jobs at different places. I just don't think they have enough people around him. There's no doubt he's an athlete. I mean, you don't put up the kind of numbers at LSU and Arizona State that Jaden Daniels put up unless you're a superstar athletically. But this is the NFL. And I'll guarantee you, those defensive coordinators, they're going to come up with things that are going to make his life really, really hard as a rookie quarterback, and it's further complicated. He doesn't have a hell of a lot around him skill-wise. Outside of Austin Eckler and McLaurin, I don't think anybody can name who the other running backs and wide receivers are because there aren't any of name recognition. So I think it's going to be a tough year there for Washington. Hopefully he can stay on the field and he does not get hurt. We go from that division